All right, so we will go ahead and get started because we have an exciting evening planned for our participants today. Good evening and welcome to the first of three of our Thursday Night Live. I cannot promise you a Saturday Night Live skit, but I can promise you a very entertaining evening coming forward. So we right now have about 1,600 people signed up for our challenge, and we are so proud of the Palo Alto community for giving their hearts and their minds and their time to this work because it is so very important. I also want to introduce you to my co-host, Jason Krolikowski. He is here to join me, my sidekick, and he will be helping us throughout this session and joining in the conversation along with us. Just a few details before we do get started. We do have translation services available for individuals who are interested in doing that. So there is a little globe at the bottom of your screen. If you're interested in either Mandarin or Spanish, please click that globe and we will make sure that you get the support that you need moving forward. And if my co-host here can advance the slide, great. So there are the translation services. That's how you get there. Make sure that you use that because we have lots of good information to share with you tonight. Before we get started, I also want to give a really sincere thanks to our partners, PTA, the Youth Community Services, City of Palo Alto. They were all instrumental in lending a hand and an eye to the work that we planned. So it's just amazing how we were able to collaborate as a group and get over 1,600 people signed up. So thank you to you all and your organizations. We definitely could not have done it without you. But behind every great plan, there is a great team. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge just a few of my team members who took a vision and actually made it a reality. And it's more incredible than I even thought it would be. That's Emily Garrison. She is a PA USD employee along with Courtney Carlamagno, Sarah Patrinoy, and Blanca Herrera. These individuals have been working night and day to bring the 21-day challenge to us. So I'm so very grateful to those folks for doing the work for us and helping us support this topic. So I've got my sidekick here, and obviously I have to put him on the spot because as you can see, he is a white male. And oftentimes when we start talking about anti-racism, there is this overwhelming feeling sometimes that is the work of people of color to manage. And Jason is here to give us his story about why he joined the 21-day equity challenge, why it's important to him, and what he hopes to get out of that. Jason, let me turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Krolikowski. I'm the Director of Student Services in Palo Alto Unified, and want to thank everyone for having us tonight. Big shout out to all the people that have been acknowledged, and including our guest speakers tonight, and the audience for being brave and coming and listening to us. So just a little bit about my story and why did I join the 21-day equity challenge? I have a basic belief that the work needs to be done together. And there was a phrase that I heard maybe about 2 or 3 years ago that really stuck with me, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. And it's really driven my why behind this work, which is silence is complicity. And if you're doing nothing, then you are continuing to be a part of the problem. I started learning slowly that being nice wasn't just enough. And, trying to just be a good person. We have to take things more seriously because otherwise we're going to be in the same place we have been. I come from my background of a very conservative and I can say racist father, where I was taught pretty early about racism. And when I got older, I learned that wasn't who I was. That's not how I want to be. And I'm an example of someone who can certainly change and learn. You'll find that you feel empowered through this work and you feel like you're really doing something good and positive for yourself and for others. And as you can see from the topics on this slide, there are so many things to learn about. I don't pretend to ever be finished in this work. I am continuous. I'm aspiring everything. And I want to invite you to continue this journey, continue to learn, have discussions with your friends, your family. And I think what you'll find from tonight is just, of course, all the emails are coming in now, I'm sorry. What you'll find tonight is some some help in having those conversations and being able to talk to people about it. So that's why I joined this. I'm incredibly proud to be part of a district in a city that values this. I am new to Palo Alto, but when I met Lana, I knew I was hooked, and I encourage everyone to continue their work with us or within your own areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate that. Jason has been a champion of the work since day one that he got here. So the more people that we can support and build up around this work, the more we can accomplish in our community. So we appreciate the work that you do. Now, enough from me. There are two very, very special people here that I want to make sure that you hear from and you know. They are going to prove to you that there is much power in storytelling. I met Jeannie first, who is the mother of Julie, and just was so impressed by her willingness to give me her insight. Her storytelling is just amazing. She is small, but she packs a powerful punch. Jeannie has been since 1960 a science educator in secondary schools in England, Ghana, and Nigeria, as well as the US. Then she was a professor of science education in the US, and she sponsored master's and PhD students in the work. And she also taught summer seminars in 8 other countries. So Jeannie has been around a little bit. In retirement, if you can call it that, as a member of the League of Women Voters, she's focusing on anti-racist work and in our schools and in our community. Jeannie provided a short bio, but trust me, folks, she packs a lot of information. She has done so many amazing things in her lifetime. So we really, really look forward to hearing from Jeannie on this work. And beside her is her esteemed daughter, Julie Lythcott-Haims. If you don't know Julie by now, you live in Palo Alto, you must be living under a rock. Both Julie and Jeannie are part of the Bay Area. And they are just amazing people. Julie is a writer, a speaker, and she is very often saying a human, which is, I believe, what she's always leading in. Julie believes in humans and is deeply interested in what gets in our way. She is a New York Times bestselling author of the Anti-Helicopter Parent Manifesto, How to Raise an Adult. Her TED Talk on the subject has made more than 5 million views. In 2020, she became a regular contributor with CBS This Morning on parenting. Her second book, and the critically acclaimed and award-winning prose poetry memoir, Real American, which illustrates her experience as a Black and biracial person in white spaces. And Julie is about to launch her third book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, which will be out in April 2021. So we are very excited to hear about that. But that's not all Julie does. Julie was a former corporate lawyer and a Stanford dean. She holds a BA from Stanford, a JD from Harvard, and an MFA in writing from California College of Arts. And I want to be just like her when I grow up. So she makes me feel lazy. But there's so many special things about Julie. She's also served on the board of Common Sense Media, the Foundation for College Education, Global Citizens Year, the Writer's Grotto. I could go on and on and on about Julie, but we do not have enough time. So I am going to turn it over to these two wonderful people to share their lives and their story and their heart with you. And I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoy them. Jeannie and Julie.
Thank you so much, Lana. When you asked me to be a part of this amazing 21-day race and equity challenge in my hometown, Palo Alto, I was honored. You mentioned my book, Real American. It's this memoir about being Black and biracial in white spaces. And I have the privilege, the tremendous privilege of getting to go around the country with this book and talk about race with people far and wide. But it's really quite a special honor when your own hometown community says, hey, you want to join us for this thing? We've lived here since 2000. 2002, we actually moved into the house. My 2 children came up through the Palo Alto Unified, Briones, the school formerly known as Terman, and Gunn. And we are very much members of this community. So it's really an honor to be here. And I wanted to reach out and ask my mom to join me because as the Black daughter of a white mother in this America, we've had some experiences that I think are unique and instructive. And we want to kind of share a bit about who we are and kind of get some stimulated conversation going. You want to say anything? We're not.
No.
Okay. So we want to thank Lana and her entire team, all of the sponsors that are behind making this important conversation and challenge happen. We want to thank the many, many people who've decided to make this conversation a part of their Thursday night. And I just want to say, Mom, thank you for joining me in this, because I rarely get to speak with you on things. So
I'm glad you asked me.
oh, good. So here's how it's going to go. We're each going to take about 12 minutes. I've already used about a minute and a half of my 12 to just sort of give you a sense of who we are with respect to race. And after we've each had a chance to go, then we're going to turn to a moment that was challenging for us as mother and daughter in this very racialized American moment. And then we're going to turn to a call to action for white folks mostly. We shall see. I want you to notice what comes up for you as we speak. Our bodies will signal for us a response before our brains can label it as the feeling it is. So whatever you're feeling in response to what Mom shares and what I share, it's valid, it's all good. Notice it. Is your mouth dry? Is your heart rate increasing? Is your voice deepening? Are you running your fingers through your hair? You know, if you're feeling any discomfort, it's going to show up in your body before it shows up in your mind. And pay attention, maybe jot it down. You know, we've asked the folks who run this to keep the chat open tonight. And we're doing that because we trust you and we believe in you. We think we can have hard conversations and we don't have to shut it all down in fear that somebody's going to jump in and say something awful. If somebody does jump in and say something awful, we'll call it out and maybe that person will get booted. But let's see if we can't have an open, fair, frank, vulnerable exchange on a topic that we've all got to get a whole lot better at speaking about. That's our hope for tonight. You want to say anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. So me and my a brief sense of my story. So as I've said, as Lana said, I'm Black and biracial. My father, my mother's husband, was this amazingly tall, dark, handsome Black man. So I am the product of these two who fell in love when it was illegal in many places for them to fall in love and marry and have me. So I come from people who broke the rules. And I think that's probably where I get it from. Okay. So my parents chose to raise me in white towns. This was in pursuit of the opportunities my father had available as a physician in the world of public health and academic medicine. They moved me to towns with the best schools or the biggest houses, what have you. It was a very solid middle-class upbringing, but it was highly white. And that turned out to be really problematic for me. I began childhood as an innocent child in my youngest years. But by age 3 or 4, I had learned from the looks on the faces of strangers as I walked down the street with my Black daddy. I learned from the eyes and the sneers of some strangers, some white folks, that something was wrong with daddy and something was probably wrong with me too. As a biracial kid, I think I could A/B test racism, right? Mom wasn't getting those looks that daddy got. And I'd say by age 4, I knew something was wrong with daddy and with me. So I plunged from the innocence of early childhood into this place that I will ultimately call self-loathing as more and more microaggressions and racism came my way. And I ultimately believed the stereotypes. I believed I should not like myself as a Black person. I believed something was wrong with us. I couldn't have articulated it that way. I can only say now at 53, looking back, oh yeah, racism finally clamped itself on my sense of self and held on. A few of my stories. Well, I guess I've said strangers. This is hard, I know.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way strangers looked at me and daddy was sort of my earliest lesson. And then I would learn that some teachers were going to discount my intellectual capabilities. Mom would have to fight for me to just get into the advanced coursework, the advanced lane. They finally tested me and proved that I should be in the advanced classes, but my teacher still made fun of that and said, oh, you're only in gifted and talented because your mother argued with the principal. And I had friends say really mean things. And or ignorant things. Somebody wrote the N-word on my locker on my 17th birthday, senior year of high school, and I didn't tell anybody because I was ashamed by that point to be the N-word of my school and the N-word of my town. I was in an entirely white high school, 1,200 kids, 2 Jewish families, and us. That's what I mean by all white. And the Jews were not considered white in Wisconsin. So I had gotten these messages over the years, came out here to Stanford to go to college. And I remember getting uncomfortable looks at the Stanford Shopping Center. As I grew older and made a living here, built a family here, I would go into Safeway and, you know, in the era before smartphones, I was maybe writing a check as the white person in front of me had written a check, but the white person in front of me wasn't asked for their ID, but I was. Those subtle things that are just so demeaning. I was a pretty prominent person in my career, if I may say so. I was a corporate lawyer at 5 Palo Alto Square. I was a dean at our amazing university right up the road. And I remember on the 3rd day of my new job, before I was the dean of freshmen, I was a senior staff member in the president's office. And we had a new president, John Hennessy, being inaugurated, whatever the term is for the president of a university. It was his installation or what have you, the big formal ceremony with robes and music, and dignitaries were arriving at the president's office. And we were all going to go sort of in a motorcade, golf carts over to Frost Amphitheater. It was my 3rd day on the job as a senior member of this staff. And an important white woman walked in the door, handed me her coat without making eye contact, and continued on to where the dignitaries were gathering. She assumed that I was the help. And I had been so proud to have landed that job until that moment. And I would go on to be proud in that job, but I'll never forget how dehumanizing that felt. Or when I looked around for a colleague to whom I could just say, can you believe that happened? And I did dare to say, can you believe that happened? I was told, don't take it personally. It's not a big deal. You know, it could have happened to me. No, it would not have happened to the white dude standing next to me. I'm 100% sure. All right. I've knocked on doors in Palo Alto. Family member was staying with a friend. A family member from New York was staying with one of his friends who lives in our town. And he'd left something behind at their house. And he asked me to go get it and mail it to him back in New York. So I go and it's dark and I walk up the walkway, a different neighborhood in our Palo Alto. And she greets me with the most disdainful, how can I help you? And I say, hi, I'm Julie Lythcott. I'm Michael's. You're what? Yes, I'm sorry. I'm Michael Lythcott's aunt. What? Yes, I'm Julie Lythcott. I'm using my maiden name that she might recognize. I'm Julie Lythcott. I'm here to, my nephew, he left something at, oh. And then her whole demeanor changed because I'm not some strange black lady at the door. And by this point, it was all I could do to not swear at her. Instead, I just wrote about it in my memoir. Writing memoir is the best revenge. All right, my final story here as I zero in on my final 2 minutes. There was a fundraiser for Juana Briones Elementary. My favorite Palo Alto elementary school sits in our backyard. Our 2 children went there K through 5. And there was a fundraiser, you know, a Harvest Moon fundraiser for the school. And I'm a busy full-time working mom up the street at Stanford, but I'm trying to do my part. So I sign up to work the murder mystery party that's going to be held, and people buy tickets and they're going to go, and the money all goes to the school. So I show up to work the party. I help the host clean up. Dan, my husband, is there too. We're now bringing food out and drink out. People are gathering. The music is on. People are drinking. And it was a murder mystery party about athletes marooned on a desert island, and people were supposed to dress up. And a member of our community showed up in blackface, decked herself head to toe in black shoe polish, had an afro on, and I just froze. My mouth went dry. People were laughing. Everybody, almost everybody was white. And some other guy was in the center of a group dancing with an afro wig on. And someone shouted at him, "Show us your jive dancing." And then he pretended to dance like he thinks Black people dance. And I cast my eyes about for rescue. And I landed my eyes on a Native American Stanford professor who I knew. And he and I made eye contact like, is this what the white folks do when they don't realize we're among them? And I grabbed my husband's hand and hightailed it out of there. And I told a few people and I wrote a letter. But you know what? I was made to feel like I had made too much out of it. Nobody to this day has come to me and said, that was shitty. I'm so sorry that happened. And you can say, don't make such a big deal of it. You're a grown-up. I'm here to tell you, my time is up. I'm here to tell you it hurts. It hurts. Racism isn't just the Ku Klux Klan burning crosses on your lawn. Racism in the form of tiny little slights and judgments and assumptions and presumptions hurts. And I think what we're trying to do here in this 21-day racial equity challenge is to try to figure out how it can hurt less for brown and Black people to live in and go to school in and work in and drive in Palo Alto. Over to you.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had to write my remarks down. I'm not as used to Julie doing this kind of thing just off the top of my head. I could if I was teaching chemistry, but and so I'm going to be reading from it, but I will try to. Is this good?
Yeah,
Am I
you're
doing
good,
that?
you're good.
Okay. Yeah. So hi, I'm Jeannie Lythcott. I am white. I was born in 1939 in a little tiny village in the north of England called Rye Hill in Yorkshire. We spoke a dialect in my village. Let me give you a taste of it. Here all see all sen out, eight all sup all and pay not, and if they ever does out for note, all do it for the sen. So we learned at school that how we spoke wasn't right. And the King's English was my first foreign language. The first person I met in my teens who was different from me was a Catholic girl. Somehow, we learned that the elites down in London, Oxford, and Cambridge said of us, northern born, northern bred, strong in arm and weak in head. We kind of ignored them and had our own rules for living honorably. Most students left school at the age of 16 to get a job. The guys usually got a job in the mines, and the girls would get a shopkeeper job or they'd stay home doing daycare with the little ones who were still at home. But in the academic secondary school, there were 2 more years of schooling, which we called the sixth form. When I was in the sixth form, I was made head girl of the school. And in the last year of the sixth form, a teacher came to me and he asked me if I was going to go to university. And I said, I didn't know I could. And so he started to explain, including that the government would give whatever money was required for a student to attend university if she or he were offered a place at the university there. Last, he told me that one had to apply to be accepted. So I did that. I was accepted by Manchester University. And indeed, the government sent me all the money I needed, not just for books, paper, pens, and lab fees, but for food and lodging and travel and toiletries and haircuts and rain gear and shoes and everything. We were quite poor. I graduated with honors 3 years later. And in 1987, I earned a PhD in chemistry and education. And the question is, suppose that teacher had never asked me that. It's a long and complicated story from there on, from here. But after graduation, I taught for 2 years in secondary school, and then I applied for a position teaching the sciences in several former British colonies or dominions. Ghana, newly independent of British colonial rule, was the first to respond to my application. They invited me to London for an interview, where they offered me a position on the spot. The new president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, needed to find lots of nurses for his country since the British nurses had left en masse at independence. He wanted the best and brightest young women to apply for a new one-year accelerated program specializing in the sciences and English, from which students would graduate and immediately begin the degree nursing program. To attract the best and brightest candidates, he offered scholarships that included everything. It worked. We had about 1,000 applications for the 100 places that we had at the school. I joined a faculty of 3, 2 English teachers and a science teacher, each of whom had spent several years in Ghana. The young Ghanaian women we'd admitted to our school were some of the most brilliant students I had ever experienced and ever had the privilege to teach. School began very shortly after I arrived in country, and I quickly understood that my colleagues' approach to teaching these brilliant young women in science was to write notes on the board for them to copy, then study, then take a quick test on them, even if the class had involved doing an experiment. My colleague knew better than I did that these 100 young women were the best and brightest, but she acted towards them as if they were learning impaired. I began to notice other white and Ghanaian interactions that rested on the assumption that Ghanaians were not very bright compared to us whites, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. I met a young British man there who had recently arrived in Ghana. We had a few interesting dates. He'd already had a book published in England. He invited me to his company's monthly lunch, and we sat at the end of this long, long table. When conversation seemed to lag, my friend raised his hand and asked, "What are we going to do for Victoria's birthday?" The chairman said, "Who's Victoria?" My friend said, "You know, the attractive secretary in the mailroom." The chair said, "What do you mean, attractive?" My friend didn't. I mean, as far as they go. I asked him as soon as we got outside what that was all about. And he said that in this company, you couldn't show in any way that they might be comparable to us, white people. If you did, they'd send you back to England. So I challenged him. So you'd rather fully demean a group of people you don't know, but who have black and brown skin, than be sent back to England? In the midst of babbling on, he essentially said, it was true. We never saw each other again. Soon thereafter, I met an American physician, George I. Lythcott, MD, co-director of a program to support Ghana's plan to build its own National Institutes of Health. He was also newly arrived in Ghana. He was black. Eventually, we began to be seen together around town. The white folks shunned us as if we cared. I began to want to learn about Ghana and its peoples. I learned that there were castles on the seacoast west of Accra, where hundreds of years ago, captured Ghanaians were imprisoned until a ship arrived in which they were stuffed and then taken across the ocean to slavery. No one in England had taught me that. I went from being wrapped in a shawl of pride as I flew 3,000 miles from London to Accra and began to understand the size of the British Empire. From that to shying away from these expat Brits, my people. I just couldn't stomach the British, my forebears, and the undeniable collective history of my people, still so very much alive in the way they treated Ghanaians in the present day. Back to the school in Ghana. In that accelerated course, I taught as I would teach top-notch students in England the big issues of human biology, chemistry, and physics. But I did more. I created a choir. We sang once a week. I would learn some of their songs and they would learn some of mine. I also created a netball team. I'd been captain of my school team and was on the university's first team as a freshman. We piled onto the buses for competitive netball games around Accra. They created a school song. They taught it to me on the bus going to a game. The 3 other teachers had no idea it existed. Yeah, they were all white. Yeah, I didn't say that, did I? Yeah, they were white and British. Thank you. Now I was looking for communities to be properly restructured, looking for individuals to be seen for who they were, to be connected, to be noticed with care and interest. not as a source of indentured servants. Time passed, we moved to the USA, and in the 1970s, I was hired as a chem physics teacher at an independent school in Rockland County, New York. I then became headmistress there. I hired the first Black faculty member, math teacher, and soccer coach. The first 3 Black students were accepted then. One day on campus, I saw one of those students wearing a red, black, and green cap. And I said quietly as we passed, "Love your colors." He said at graduation how important it was for him to have been seen that day. My last story about race and schooling brings me to the school year 2013-14 in Palo Alto. I was to retire from Stanford on January the 1st, 2014. I told the director of my program that I wanted to spend 4 hours a day, all year long, from the beginning to end, in a charter school, teaching chemistry, with the intention of trying to close the achievement gap there. The student body was almost all students of color. She approved the change, and I began that plan. On the first day of school, the bell had rung and the door closed, and the teacher there was introducing me to the rest of the class, when the door bursts open and a young man hurls himself through the door, turns around, bangs it shut, and the door's closed, and makes his way across the classroom to his own table. On the way, knocked down 3 backpacks and bumped 2 people on the back of the head, just creating drama. "I know what this means," I said to myself. I learned his name is Luis. On day 3, I have created the investigation that they're going to engage in. The materials and directions are already on the tables, and I'm outlining the way in which this investigation that I've created is situated. I noticed Luis and Ozzy and Manuel, they're talking to each other while I'm talking. I didn't do anything about it at the time, but I waited until I'd finished my introduction, and then I went up to the 3 young men. And I said, "I noticed that you were talking while I was talking, so maybe you are prepared for this investigation, or maybe you're not. What do you think?" Ozzy jumped in. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Lythcott. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I would love to be part of this investigation. Can I?" And I sent him on. Manuel jumped in and said the same thing. "Dr. Lythcott, I would not have disrespected you for anything. I really wouldn't. And I do want to be part of this. Can I be a part of it?" Off he went. So now I'm left with Luis. And I said, "So Luis, do you want to be part of this investigation that I created just especially for your class?" Luis did one of these. "No, I do not. I'm sick and tired of the way school is always blaming me for everything." And I said, "Okay, there's a desk over there. Why don't you go sit there for a sec? I'm going to go check in with every group that they're all right, and I'll come back and visit." So I checked in. I went back to visit Luis, and I asked him the same thing. "So now you've seen what they're doing in this investigation. Are you interested in joining them?" "I told you I want nothing to do with it. I'm sick and tired of school blaming me for everything." So I said, "Okay." I went back a second time and got exactly the same response. So I went back a third time. And this time I sat myself down beside him and got my face about 12 inches away from his. And I said, "Here's the thing, Luis. You have no idea who I am." I'm going to say that again. "You have no idea who I am. Luis, I am your teacher, and I may not let you fail." One more time, Luis. "I am your teacher, and I may not let you fail. And I'm so sorry you won't be taking part in this investigation. I really wanted to know how you think." And I walked away. I didn't know until much later that Luis had been following behind me from the get-go. The next day, the class was unrecognizable. Everybody came alive and alert. They were asking questions and answering questions, reporting back on 2-person conversations. They were fully and wholly invested in learning in that class. They became invested in their homework. They came to see me in study hall. That they were in every manner you can imagine, completely in charge of their own learning and how well they did. And you know, at the end of that school year, they had just about closed the achievement gap all by themselves. It was incredible. And so I know that being seen and being noticed as worthy of caring attention is not only important in schools, but everywhere that humans congregate, especially across racial lines. Thank you.
Woo! Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. And in case it wasn't completely obvious, Luis thrived in that classroom too.
Oh, yes.
Right? Luis was very much engaged from the minute Mom said, "You don't understand. I'm your teacher. I cannot let you fail."
Right.
He decided, she cares about me. This lady cares about me. And he then showed her what he could do.
And Luis had been sending the message that all of those students, all students of color, had been sending all along by sitting back and not doing anything, right? And once he had achieved respect as a student, right, they stepped up to it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mom. So I want to turn now to something that was a difficult moment for me and Mom. I think my mother's an amazing human. You've got a tiny glimpse of why. I used to think of her as the blackest white lady I knew because she really took quite seriously. I was born in 1967, being in a mixed marriage, having a mixed kid was very new then. And Mom was doing her best to really bring her sensibilities, having been this white British lady who was in her 20s in West Africa, who loved Ghanaians and Nigerians and Black people, and then my Black father, and came to the US and was really stunned by the racism she encountered here in 1969 when they arrived, and was really doing her best to understand what was happening that was relevant to Black folk, even though she herself is white. So the incident that I want to talk about was Charlottesville. As I think everyone on the call probably recalls, in August 2017, there was a march in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is a university town, not unlike ours, of white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And it happened on a Friday night. And I got a New York Times alert about it sometime in the middle of the night, I guess. Woke up and saw it on a Saturday morning. And I was 49 years old, rounding the bend to 50, and I felt terrified. I'm just going to say that. I had not heard much about white supremacists marching since my childhood in the 70s. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it wasn't really on my radar as a thing. I thought we were, not quite past it, because I knew that the white supremacists were gaining in numbers. They were buying guns when Obama became the nominee, and they were joining hate groups. I was paying attention. I was writing poetry about that stuff. But somehow the brazen marching in a town like ours, in polo shirts and khakis, unmasked, unhooded, that surprised me and frightened me, because it told me they felt emboldened. And boy, how much more we know now in 2021. This was August 2017. So I get the alert. I'm feeling a little frightened. I don't want to be frightened. I'm a professional woman. I have kids. I'm grown. But I needed my mother. We live together. We co-own our home here. That's how we afford Palo Alto. Okay? Like some of you. And Mom is in an attached cottage. We live in what she calls the main house. So I'm wandering downstairs on a Saturday morning to try to find my mom. And I see her outside in the garden. She's an amazing gardener. Maybe that's part of the British thing. And so she's puttering around the garden. So I say, Mom, I don't know if you heard this. Mom doesn't know it's news unless Brian Williams says it. What's his name? Lester Holt. Lester Holt says it on NBC News, or the New York Times has written about it, or the San Jose Mercury News. And so this news, because it had happened so late last night, wasn't yet in the form of news Mom had ingested. So I'm informing her, hey, Mom, did you hear about what happened in Charlottesville? What? And I said, Nazis, neo-Nazis and white supremacists march. They had torches. They were just, marching through the streets. And she's like, wow, that's terrible. And she starts to go into her narrative about Donald Trump and what the Republicans are doing and this and that. And she's out here in the conversation and I'm right here. And I walk toward her and I say, yeah, it's really, I just don't know what to, and I'm sort of sputtering because I'm frightened, okay? Why am I coming to her? Because I need my mommy, all right? But I don't want to say that. I'm 49, okay? So I'm coming closer and I'm saying, yeah, it's really, she's like, I know, this is just so blah, 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 blah. And, you know, going to politics and them and they, and I am here and I say, can I have a hug? Which I did not want to have to say. I didn't want to have to ask my mom for a hug. I'm grown. Okay, so she said, oh, of course. And she came toward me and hugged me. And I said into her body, this is scary, or I'm scared. And she said, it's scary for all of us. And I said, Mom, with all due respect, even the most woke white person can't. And she said, I am so much more than a woke white person. And I said, Mom, oh, sorry, I am so much more than a woke white person. I married your father. You are my daughter. And I said, Mom, the white supremacists don't know when you're walking down the street that you married a black man or that you're my mother. I need to talk about how this feels for me. Because I'm the one in their crosshairs. And I say this all the while knowing, look how light-skinned I am. I'm barely in their crosshairs. People darker than me have it much worse. And yet, I've been taught by America since the age of 4 that I'm black and that black is problematic. And I have done the work to become a self-loving black woman. I am there. But when the white supremacists are in town, they're not coming for you. They're coming for me. So we had this conversation and I said, if you will just let me talk for 45 seconds about what this feels like for me and ask me, how are you? Are you okay? What can I do? And if you do that for 45 seconds and let me feel seen, like you did with Louise, right?
Yeah.
Then I can listen to you say whatever you need to say as a very woke white woman about white supremacy. And I'm not telling you this or saying this now to make my mother cry.
No, I know.
We are sharing this because it's a very nuanced thing. We're both progressive liberals. We voted for the same people. My mother is an incredible woman who, until her last breath, will be fighting for black and brown people to be treated with dignity and kindness and fairness and be given opportunity. That's who she is. My point here is, if we were having trouble having a conversation where the black person could feel seen in that pain, how does anyone else do it? Right? So that's what we wanted to offer.
I was so far away from acknowledging that you were a human being who could be hurt. That you had been so strong all of your life, and so I don't think I heard the word frightened, Julie, or read it as fear. I'm so sorry. It's not the only time I let you down this way. We've been learning a lot together.
We have been learning a lot together.
As 2 adults recently, exactly. And life is good.
Yeah.
But I needed to be taught that in your area.
Well, I think you were accustomed to knowing precisely how you feel about racism and the bad people. You have a very clearly articulated philosophy and values. Mom's laptop says white supremacy can't function in our absence, quoting Aye Que Arma. She's got quotes like this around everywhere, right? There's no question. You were, it was almost like your own feelings and concerns about these racists
were more important than having.
Well, it was just, that's where you showed up. I'm going to say what I think instead of let me pause and lean into the person who's expressing some pain. But I get that you've always seen me as strong and you weren't thinking, oh, Julie is somebody who might need comfort in this moment. Yeah, because of course I'm trying to project, like I'm strong and confident and all of that, right? I didn't want to come down and ask you for a hug.
No, I know.
I didn't want that. I wanted to be impenetrable, right? But I wasn't.
Yeah. But I think the thing about this story for me is that if I'm going to have conversations in this 21-day challenge, which I'm hoping to do, I've put out the word that I would love to have conversations about race and so on, that I need to have all of my antennae up, to hear what's there to hear, to enable people to say what's real if they're frightened, and to know that they're being heard and cared for. So this story was right on time for me.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. In terms of what I'm going to try to do in this 21-day thing that you've organized, Lana, which I adore.
Yeah. Do you want to say what, how we talked about the talking stick, like who has a talking stick? Is that something you feel like you can describe?
No, you tell me.
Should I tell it? And then you are going to do your kind of what you want to say to white people?
Yes, exactly. Okay.
And then we're going to have a few moments for questions. So
Yeah.
first of all, I want to acknowledge we are getting a lot of great comments, and we appreciate that. I'm not reading the comments because I'm paying attention to Mom.
Yeah.
Mom's not reading the comments because Zoom is sort of a, complicated terrain when you're 82.
It's true.
More props to you, right? 82 on Zoom. Okay, so the way that I think about it is a talking stick, and I may be appropriating someone else's culture by referring to it as a talking stick, so I apologize if that is culturally insensitive. I learned this in conversation facilitation. The point is, I was the person who approached and said, hey, white supremacists, Charlottesville, 2017, I'm, frightened. And what we all must strive to do when somebody raises something is let the story stay with them for a while at least, to validate what they've said, to do some active listening. So you just repeat back to them what they've said so they know they've been heard.
Yeah.
Before the rest of us say, you know what, that happened to me too, or I feel this way, or what have you. Whether it's a person who's speaking about a sexual assault, this happened to me, or I witnessed this, the person who's raising it needs to be seen and heard and listened to and validated in that before someone else takes the mic and starts to say what they think. It's just a conversational technique that ends up making person A feel safer and like, okay, I'm not being dismissed, I'm not being doubted, I'm not being,
being heard.
I am being heard. Yeah. It's not that the second person's words are not valid or feelings or responses. It's just taking the time to slow it down and making sure that that person got to say what they needed to say, and then the next person goes.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's a bit of useful info to some of y'all out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me share that. We did talk about it in advance that I was going to share this. I didn't spring it on.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's really valuable advice. Yeah. How are we doing?
We're doing great. We have like 10 minutes left.
Oh, okay. I'd like to bring.
And we want to go to some Q&A, so we don't want to.
Yes.
Take up the whole time.
No. This is just show. Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, I want to bring this book to
I'll
people's.
hold it up for you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. To people's attention, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. He says, quote, "The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it," unquote. It might be useful during this 21-day racial equity challenge to have a go at describing it, for it comes in so many ways and forms, each instance requiring a way to identify it and a specific way to dismantle it. The racism in our nation against Black Americans is so often virulent and deadly. I know other groups are also discriminated against, but if we are serious, we must start with the worst, with the hardest, and find ways to uproot anti-Black racism where we live, here in Palo Alto. It's so much easier to send money to groups in other cities, other states, and other countries. But the only way to truly work to undo racism is for everyone to root it out at home. Maybe you are white and do not know of racism at work here. I'd love you to promise to work to find out what we white Palo Altans can do to understand how racism shows up in Palo Alto, preferably without requiring that Black folk have to tell us their stories and so have to feel the hurt and pain all over again in order for we white folk to see what's happening. It seems to me that there is one redeeming feature of our current world, a world wherein Black lives are at stake, and that is that white folk, we who created and maintain the disease of anti-Black racism, we have one more chance, maybe the last chance, to scrape out every last ounce of the racism that we've created. So it's done, finished, over, and starting with Palo Alto. Ibram Kendi tells us that anti-racist work begins when we each acknowledge that everyone has racist elements within. One way to begin to move against racism is to become aware of the ways we have constructed our lives, why some aspects are as they are and are as they are not. So anti-racist work does not begin with we white folk telling what we do of good with, what we do of good with and for others. But when we did or felt something about an event that seems to have an element of a person or persons being seen and felt as less than me. The existence in our minds of a hierarchy of the worth of humans. That's the origin, the core element, and the deadly outcomes of anti-Black racism. This 21-day racial equity challenge offers really useful ways for each of us to begin. Thank you so much for listening.
That was beautiful. I'll add that when I get to talk to audiences about my work, my book, Real American, talk about race, I leave audiences trying to think about two things. One, do you treat Black and brown people as fully human? Two, what are you doing to make your world kinder and safer for Black and brown people? So I'd love to send folks off thinking about that. We have like 6 minutes, so ask your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Julie and Jeannie. I know I can probably speak to the crowd. Such a moving story. It made me think about some of my very own experiences, and you know, that love and caring concern has to be a part of all of us because we're all in this together. So I hope that the audience took what the message was, which is we have work to do. So thank you so much, Jeannie, for that. While we are queuing the questions, I've got one for both of you because since the 21-day challenge started, I've consistently heard a message that why are we talking about racism? It doesn't exist anymore. So what would you say to people who still believe racism no longer exists?
No, you go. You had the reaction.
Yeah. I would say, so let me inform you that the first thing about you that I've learned is that you are not seeing what is there in your face, right? That you're not seeing what is there as you go to the supermarket or the car wash or move around town in circles that are not your own. And so please be invited to open your eyes and ears and to learn.
Yep. Thank you.
What I'd say.
Yeah,
But I would say with a little tongue in cheek, okay, let's swap skin. How about you go be a dark skin, not with me because I have light skin, but like, fine. Why don't you walk this world? Imagine if you walk this world with dark skin for a week or a month. Just imagine, be less likely to get a job, less likely for your resume to be, put in the yes pile, less likely to be able to rent a house. Right? There's research. Don't insult us by saying it's not a thing.
Yeah.
The fact that you're not aware of the research is evidence of your own ignorance. And it's, get your head out of the sand. Come on.
Very good.
Why do you so need to say it's not happening? I mean, I think that's the thing. I think for a lot of white folks, it's such a terrible thing. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They're like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Instead of, wow, yeah, my people are responsible for having created this regime hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I didn't create it. I'm not responsible for it, but I benefit from it still. Whiteness is a tailwind that just pushes people along, according to the work of Dolly Chugg and Beverly Daniel Tatum, right? Whereas when you're a person of color or you are marginalized in other ways, you face a headwind.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
White privilege is hard for white folks to accept.
Yeah. What would be your thinking around white fragility? Do you believe in that concept? Do you believe that prevents us from moving forward in the work?
I think it's real. I think it's because there's no inner defense against the charge of racism for some people. There's been no education about how to live with white privilege with honor in a multicultural setting. And so being called out and being suddenly perhaps recognizing things about yourself that you didn't know or didn't want to know, can be hard. I think it's, from my point of view, taking care of somebody who is fragile in a particular area is important. That's one thing that perhaps white folks, as we become clearer about the conversation about race, one of the things that we can be clearer about is how to help somebody who is feeling fragile to get into the real world and not be afraid or not feel put down by it.
Great. Thank you. There's a question in our Q&A that says, this is for you, Jeannie. Do you have anything to share about what influenced you, your development into the adult you did, and with divergent views from so many of those people that you were around and that you worked with? So what were your influences that made you the person you are today?
And so that story that I told you about how I grew up around white folks. The only different person that I met was white and Catholic, when I was growing up. And so there was no conversation about race in the village. So when I got to Ghana and I saw how these brilliant young women, as I said, they're some of the most brilliant students I've ever had the privilege to teach. When they were there, there wasn't any bias. I think that was it. I recognized how brilliant they were. But the other thing was, I noticed that my colleagues dealt with these wonderful young women as if they were learning a pair. That was what hit me over the head. In a setting that I was used to, which was teaching brilliant students, right? And so on and so on, where I'd not been in class. The four people who were in the same honors program with me at the university were four white guys from Yorkshire.
Can I add, I think your empathy, Mom, also comes from the fact that you grew up poor.
Definitely.
You grew up poor in
As a church
in a part of England that was maligned by the proper British down in London.
Oh yeah.
So you had an empathy. You knew what it was like to be otherized.
Yeah.
You knew what it was like to be presumed you were less capable.
Oh yeah.
And as a woman in the sciences, I don't know how conscious you were of this then, because in some ways I think you have not examined all of this.
No, I haven't. But
Yeah.
a quick story. So I get on the netball team. The first netball team was a freshman at the university. We're on a train going to play a match in Leicester. And the captain of the netball team says in a voice dripping with distaste, "Oh, Jeannie, when are you ever going to learn to speak the Queen's English?" And I shot back, "I will sit down next to you and take any exam in English language that you can bring up, and I will beat you into the ground. I like the way I talk."
That's who I come from. Good job.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have another question for you. You two are so cute. What can white people do to get out of their space and find ways to make the world kinder and safer for Black and brown people? As a brown woman, I struggle with how to offer loving, smart, and actionable advice when asked.
The advice I try to give people is, again, racism isn't just the KKK burning down your house. It's the subtle daily things. So, for example, people don't sit next to us on buses. If you take the bus up and down El Camino in Palo Alto and there's a Black person with an empty seat next to, not in COVID, because all right, but back when we can be next to each other again, choose a seat next to the Black person and just smile, be like they're a regular person and you're sitting down. Don't make it out like I'm doing an act of charity. I'm sitting next to you, Black person. Like, don't overdo it, but just know that people avoid us. They avoid us on buses. They avoid us on trains. They avoid us in elevators, right? Catch yourself when you're about to make a choice about somebody on the basis of an immutable characteristic that God/the universe gave us, okay? Studies show that white women expect Black and brown people to part when they're walking down the sidewalk, okay? It used to be the law in the South. It ain't the law anymore, but it's so baked in. Do your own experiment, you know? If you're white, step to the side for someone else walking down University Avenue or California Avenue or what have you, okay? Notice if your inclination is to wait for others to part the waters for you, okay?
Mm.
Are you grateful when a service person who is more likely to be Black or brown or Asian is delivering something, is holding a door, is doing what have you? Are you kind and courteous, recognizing the humanity in that person, every person, regardless of what role they may be playing in your life? These are the subtle things. Whose media are you consuming? Are you reading novels about the experiences of people of color? Are you listening to podcasts, watching TV, watching movies, consuming the news about what is happening? Were you shocked when George Floyd was killed? I wasn't. I was horrified by it, and particularly how, but I have been watching that shit happen since Trayvon Martin, who was 17, was gunned down in 2012. Okay, if you weren't watching, then why?
Yeah.
Whose news were you paying attention to when in 2014, a 12-year-old boy was shot dead in a park, not unlike our parks, but in Cleveland, by police who thought he was a Black man with a gun? He was a 12-year-old boy with a toy gun. Our kids can't play with toy guns because they might be presumed to be criminals. And the policemen who shot Tamir Rice, 12, were never indicted to this day. If you don't know his name, learn about it. And learn about Keenan Mose in Los Altos, very much alive, Black, child of a friend of mine, gets his driver's license. They're a Black family. They're one of the 6 Black families in Los Altos. Forgive me. 12 Black families in Los Altos. And he gets his driver's license. And the Los Altos police pulled him over 17 times in the first 18 months. This child was licensed by the state of California to drive. It took the Los Altos police 17 times to learn one of the Negroes has learned to drive. Okay? When someone tells you that story, don't say, well, if he was just following the law.
No.
Well, the police are just there to protect us.
Oh,
Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop presuming that your experience is the experience of Black and brown people. Instead, be curious, lean forward, lean in. What are we going to do about that?
Thank you.
I'd love to-
Next. Well, so we're out of time, but I'm going to ask people to stay on because I know they want to hear from you, Julie and Jeannie. So if you want to stay on, please do. We're going to keep going, but if you have to go, we understand. But we've got some really great questions in the queue, Julie and Jeannie, if you're willing to stick around.
Can I, yeah, I am. Yeah.
We're, as you can see, we're both not shy. Yes.
Okay.
Let's stick around, and Mom wants to say one thing else before we go to the next question.
Read the advice that go when you get on a bus, go sit next to a person of color if you're white, and so on. And my addition to that would be, and as you sit down, say, how you doing today?
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. All right. The next question is, I'm white. I often jump to anger, fighting mode when I see or hear racist acts. I want to learn to stop, listen, validate, but don't want to assume my friends, coworkers, and parents of color wants to talk to me about it. Tips for me on how to invite a conversation.
A conversation with the person who's espousing the racist.
Right.
stuff?
They don't want to go talk to a Black person about it or a person of color. Like what, how would you approach the person who made the racist act?
I still haven't gotten
So there's a
the
racist thing that's happened. A white person has witnessed it or been there
Right.
and wants to know what to do about it without having to go to the people of color to ask for their.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The person surely has white friends, you know? And I would say to try to begin the conversation with any one of them who is a close friend. just can we explore it openly? Can we just talk about this? Will you talk about this with me?
It requires bravery.
Yes, it does.
You know, like, remember, I'm not going to name any names, don't worry. But Mom, if I may now tell you a story without naming any names.
Yeah, I got it.
Mom was a part of a group of people walking in the Baylands. And, right? And Mom, I think, brought up racism, you know, like, isn't it terrible what's happened to George Floyd or Amy Cooper situation, whatever. And one of the responses was, well, Jews are discriminated against too. And of course, Jews are discriminated against, right? My husband is Jewish. My mother-in-law is an Orthodox Jew, right? My children come from people who are from Eastern Europe and went through the Holocaust. So I got a whole lot of empathy. We all should have a whole lot of empathy for Jews, for anybody who's been marginalized. But when we're talking about Blackness and what happens to Black people, it is not loving or thoughtful or kind to say, well, they're not the only people suffering.
But
you know,
it is the place where white folks go.
they do. They don't want to talk about Blackness. They sort of like, Black people deserve what they got kind of thing. So what my point is, bravery in that moment is putting your hand on that person's shoulder or saying, you know what, could we talk about that some more? I'd really like to know where you're coming from. Summoning that bravery to get past the societal mores of like, well, it's all good. You know, like, they can say what they want. I can say what I want. No, if we're going to undo racism, you got us, white folks, you're the ones more likely to hear the white folks saying what they say when they don't realize we're around. So it requires this, like, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to summon my bravery and I'm going to put a smile on my face, because the only way you can have a constructive conversation is if you approach that person with kindness, treat them with dignity. They're going to shut you off if you show up with your anger. This is where I'm going to put in the chat. Irshad Manji's work is really illustrative. She wrote a book called Don't Label Me. She's got something called the Moral Courage Project, which teaches us how to have these difficult one-on-one conversations.
All right. So as Julie types, we'll go ahead into the next question.
Yeah.
So here's a question from a member. They indicate that if you're already doing this level of action, so I think you feel like you're woke, you're in a good place. What's the next step to really move the, kind of move the conversation along? For white folks who understand where the issues rest. What next? How do they become active?
Ibram X. Kendi would say, because I've been in dialogue with him. I got to interview him for the San Francisco Commonwealth Club, co-sponsored by Common Sense Media this summer. And my theory of change is what can happen at the individual level, like the power of the conversations and storytelling opens hearts. I believe that. That's what I try to do in my work. Ibram X. Kendi would say, it's all about changing policy. You want to be anti-racist, you want to really move the needle, vote for bail reform, vote for universal health care for all, vote for it to be easy to vote no matter, to register to vote isn't hard. Those are 3 examples of policies and situations out in the world that disproportionately negatively affect poor people, brown people, Black people, people of color more broadly, queer people, trans people, all the marginalized people. So there's a whole lot of policies you can get behind that make the world kinder and safer and more equitable. Right. And of course, here in Palo Alto, we have, had this conversation about the park.
Oh, I know, Foothill Park, exactly. And so now we're charging $6 for people to come in. And all about the whole housing thing is really about people of color.
Well, we live on Maybell. Okay.
Thank you.
Can we say it?
Yes, you can.
We live on Maybell Way, which is off Maybell Avenue, which has a whole suite of unaffordable housing. Okay. We wanted affordable housing there. They had this orchards that they were going to build on. I went to city council to stand up for affordable housing because I want everyone to be able to take advantage of these schools and this farmer's market and these amazing humans called Palo Altans. But no, instead we have, I think, 15 single family homes crammed into where you could probably put 60 families in apartments, more families of color, families who are working class or lower middle class, right? Yeah. So we got to fight for, not to keep people out, but to turn this city into one that is for all. It's just not. It's a place that's very elite. elitist and very proud of itself and wants to shut the door like we're good, we got our stuff.
Yeah, so in short, I mean, the next step is to try to get acquainted with who's making what decisions about the community in which you live, right? To be up with that. It's something that I don't do anywhere near enough of, which is to find out what bills are up in the city council. I learn about things after they've happened, unfortunately, and I need to change that. And so, yeah, that is a good next step to go to, which is to become active politically.
Great, great. Well, here's a loaded question for you, and this writer acknowledges that. This is a question for both of you. If you were in charge of PAUSD, what would you do to address the issues of systemic racism?
In the school.
Yeah, that's right.
In the school.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think needs to be talked about is the way in which we, as teachers, but remember, I've been a teacher forever, in all sorts of places. I think we have to talk about how teachers interact with young people in order to learn. There's a lot of, let me tell you how it is, kind of learning that goes on. There's the AP exams with their particular exams where people who are good at taking tests can get 4s or 5s, you know, on the test without necessarily understanding much of the science. We could have an IB program in science in Palo Alto schools, in Palo Alto PAUSD. It costs a little money, but it's a genuine science program. And so I think that what has to happen is that there has to be a conversation between leadership in the schools and all of the faculty to say, how do you fit on this spectrum, right? How come so many students of color end up in special education and are still there after 3 years? There was a message that came from state just last fall about exactly that the state was concerned about it. Some people who I don't know yet, are making sure that students of color don't get into regular classes, that they're in special ed. I don't know what the basis of that is and so on, but I know it doesn't feel right for kids. So I think there has to be this kind of open conversation from all of us that all is not well in the Palo Alto schools. And that what's desperate is that the number of students of color in Palo Alto Unified has gone down over the years because Black folks don't want to move here with their kids because the schools are not good. The schools are not empathetic to their students and so on. So I've heard that a lot.
I was on a panel sponsored by YCS this summer where we got to hear from kids in PAUSD and in local private schools about what life is like for them as kids of color, as Black kids in particular. And we heard that teachers at Gunn are saying the N-word. Yeah, and a Pally. And so my vote is in favor of all teachers having to go through a really great Joe Truss anti-racism training. You know, like everybody must have this to have confidence that you may not teach in our hallowed district if you have not done the work to demonstrate that you are committed to ensuring that all children have the opportunity to learn in your classroom. I'm going to cite now another author or researcher, Carla Shalaby. She's at the University of Michigan. She has this concept of there are no throwaway people. And that holds true in the classroom. Carla Shalaby, and I wish, stop autocorrecting, no throwaway people.
Okay, while you're doing that, Julie, I know we're running out of time, and I want to make sure people can go home, but there's one really great question here. We're going to end with the question. For those of you who did not get your question read, we're going to record them. I'll send them on to Julie and Jeannie, and we'll make sure that you get some answers to that. Is that okay for the both of you? Well, wonderful. Last question. Do you have any advice for parents of color who face racism themselves and are trying to spread anti-racism, but get shut down by white people in charge who have their reasons why we can't do X, Y, or Z, or may offend people? What would you say?
We need affinity groups. That is, just as happens in many schools, we grown-ups of color, we Black grown-ups need places and spaces where we gather and share the stories and give each other support. These places of solidarity and community are essential for our mental health and wellness. We need to center our own liberation and joy and excellence rather than continue to stay rooted in our oppression, which is, look what these people are doing to us. Look at this terrible thing that happened. Yes, terrible things are happening, but we gain strength from reminding one another, no, you've got this, you'll be okay. I went through it too. And if I may, my book, Real American, tells really difficult stories. My descent from innocence into self-loathing because of racism and microaggressions, and out ultimately to self-love. And it's on sale during Black History Month. Any place you buy an ebook, it's only $2.99, which is an enormous deal.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you want stories that'll make you feel less alone as a Black person in this America, my stories are going to be similar to yours, no matter where you grew up and when. We do have things in common. So reading each other's narratives makes us feel supported and less alone. So forgive the self-promotion, but I'm offering it as a service.
Thank you. Thank you. We so appreciate that. Any final words for the audience before we close the night? Jeannie.
I'm really honored, Lana, that you asked me to be part of this with Julie. I don't know what I have to say that is of use to others, but my story is one of, I'm at 82 years old. I know that white folks created racism and they maintain racism, that racism is wrong as well as bad. It's wrong, morally wrong. I mean, and so I know these things, and if I have a conversation with anybody who has questions about this kind of thing, I would love to hear the questions, and I promise you I will respond as thoughtfully as I'm able. I'm so glad you all were there. There were umpteen people.
Julie, we can hear all the typing like extra loud, so.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you for those final comments, Jeannie. We appreciate that. Julie, any final comments for the audience?
Yeah, sorry, I had no idea you could hear the typing. Sorry about that. I was just trying to keep up in the chat. My my website is julielythcott-haims.com. My social handles are jlythcott-haims. Would love to, if you feel like following me, please do. I really try to engage the community, my community. So that's the way to stay in touch with me.
Great. Well, thank you both for wonderful stories and a wonderful evening. I will make sure that we get some feedback to you all based on the comments in the chat. I can tell that people really enjoyed your story. So we hope you will continue with the 21-day challenge. Folks in the audience, if you have not signed up for the official 21-day challenge, do so that you can make sure you participate in the conversation and share it with your friends. The more of us that join in the cause, join in the conversation, the better we all are of. And what we're going to do is let you know, if you'll go back one slide, we have 3 more Thursday night lives coming up. So we'll see some great leaders coming in to talk to us about some other topics. Guest Coloma Smith will be here with a surprise guest. And featuring at our last closing session, we will have Joe Truss here talking about some really, really concrete stuff around our next steps. So please make sure that you join that. So at the next slide, if you have not registered, you can still register at the link provided there. And you can always go on the website and just check out all of the things that we're learning. Thank you, everybody, and good night. Appreciate it. Julie, Jeannie, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, thanks everyone.
Good night.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
All these comments.